National Electrical Code Section 358.30. A1 requires that conduits be securely fastened to the surface on which they are mounted at intervals not exceeding 3 feet. National Electrical Code Section 300.11 requires that electrical installations be installed and maintained in a safe condition. Based on these code sections, it is likely that running a 4-inch intermediate metal conduit across the tops of interior walls would not be considered a safe installation. The conduit would not be securely fastened to the walls at intervals not exceeding 3 feet, and it could pose a hazard to people or property if it were to fall. The best course of action would be to run the conduit all the way to the roof and strap it off to the trusses. This would ensure that the conduit is securely fastened and that it does not pose a hazard. This interpretation stems from the general principles of the National Electrical Code, which prioritize safety and the secure installation of electrical systems. Let's delve deeper into the implications of these code sections. National Electrical Code Section 358.30. A1 regarding secure fastening at intervals not exceeding 3 feet is crucial. This requirement exists to prevent the conduit from sagging, shifting, or becoming dislodged over time due to its own weight, vibrations, or other environmental factors. A 4-inch intermediate metal conduit, especially when filled with conductors, can be quite heavy. If it is not adequately supported, it could potentially pull away from its mounting points, creating a safety hazard. Now consider the scenario of running the conduit across the tops of interior walls. While it might seem like a convenient route, it often presents challenges in terms of meeting the 3-foot support requirement. Interior walls may not be consistently spaced, and their construction may not be suitable for providing secure attachment points every 3 feet. Furthermore, accessing the conduit for maintenance or future modifications could be difficult if it is concealed above the walls. Now let's consider National Electrical Code Section 300.11. A, which emphasizes the need for electrical installations to be installed and maintained in a safe condition. This is a broad, overarching requirement that applies to all aspects of electrical work. Running a 4-inch intermediate metal conduit across the tops of interior walls without proper support could be deemed unsafe for several reasons. Firstly, the risk of the conduit falling poses a direct threat to people in the building. Secondly, a sagging or poorly supported conduit could damage the conductors inside, leading to electrical faults or even fires. Thirdly, an improperly installed conduit could create an obstacle for other trades or maintenance personnel working in the area. Now let's address the alternative of running the conduit all the way to the roof and strapping it off to the trusses. This approach is generally considered to be a safer and more code-compliant solution. The roof trusses provide strong and stable structure to which the conduit can be securely fastened. Strapping the conduit to the trusses at appropriate intervals ensures that it is adequately supported and protected from damage. Additionally, running the conduit along the roof allows for easier access for maintenance and future modifications. While running the conduit to the roof might involve a slightly longer and more complex installation, the benefits in terms of safety and code compliance outweigh the added effort. It is important to consult with a qualified electrical inspector or engineer to ensure that the installation meets all applicable requirements. They can provide guidance on the specific methods and materials that are appropriate for the building and the electrical system. In addition to the code sections mentioned earlier, there may be other relevant requirements depending on the specific circumstances. For example, if the conduit is located in a plenum space, there may be restrictions on the types of materials that can be used. It is also important to consider the potential for corrosion or other environmental factors that could affect the integrity of the conduit. To summarize, while running a 4-inch intermediate metal conduit across the tops of interior walls might seem like a tempting shortcut, it is likely to violate the National Electrical Code and create a safety hazard. A more appropriate solution is to run the conduit to the roof and strap it off to the trusses, ensuring that it is securely fastened and protected from damage. Always consult with a qualified professional to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and standards. Let's also consider the practical implications of not following code. If an electrical installation is found to be non-compliant during an inspection, the building owner may be required to make costly repairs or modifications. In some cases, the electrical system may even be shut down until the issues are resolved. This can lead to significant disruptions and financial losses. Furthermore, if a fire or other electrical incident occurs as a result of a non-compliant installation, the building owner could be held liable for damages and injuries. Therefore, it is always best to err on the side of caution and ensure that all electrical work is performed in accordance with the National Electrical Code and other applicable regulations. When planning an electrical installation, it is helpful to create a detailed design that takes into account all relevant code requirements and safety considerations. This design should be reviewed by a qualified electrical engineer or inspector to ensure that it meets all applicable standards. The design should also specify the types of materials and equipment that will be used, as well as the methods of installation. During the installation process, it is important to follow the design carefully and to ensure that all work is performed by qualified electricians. Regular inspections should be conducted to verify that the installation is proceeding according to plan and that any potential problems are identified and addressed promptly. After the installation is complete, a final inspection should be performed to ensure that the electrical system is safe and code compliant. The inspector will typically issue a certificate of compliance if the installation meets all applicable requirements. This certificate provides assurance that the electrical system has been properly installed and that it is safe to operate. In addition to the National Electrical Code, there may be other state or local regulations that apply to electrical installations. It is important to be aware of these requirements and to ensure that all work is performed in accordance with them. State and local regulations may cover topics such as permitting, licensing, and inspection procedures. They may also include additional requirements for specific types of electrical installations, such as those in healthcare facilities or hazardous locations. To stay up to date on the latest code requirements and best practices, it is recommended to attend continuing education courses and to participate in industry events. These activities can help electricians and other electrical professionals to enhance their knowledge and skills and to ensure that they are providing safe and compliant electrical services. Now let's think about some possible variations in the situation. What if the interior walls were made of concrete or masonry instead of drywall? In that case, it might be possible to securely fasten the conduit to the walls using appropriate anchors and fasteners. However, it would still be necessary to ensure that the supports are spaced at intervals not exceeding 3 feet and that the installation is otherwise code compliant. What if the conduit was only a smaller size, such as 1 inch or 2 inch? In that case, it might be easier to support the conduit from the walls, but the 3-foot spacing requirement would still apply. It is also important to consider the weight of the conduit and the conductors inside when determining the appropriate support methods. What if the building was not a commercial building, but a residential building? In that case, the National Electrical Code requirements would still apply, but there might be some differences in the interpretation or enforcement of the code. It is important to consult with a qualified electrical inspector or engineer to ensure that the installation meets all applicable requirements. In summary, the decision of whether to run a 4-inch intermediate metal conduit across the tops of interior walls is a complex one that depends on a variety of factors. It is important to carefully consider the National Electrical Code requirements, the structural characteristics of the building, and the potential safety hazards before making a decision. When in doubt, it is always best to consult with a qualified professional to ensure that the installation is safe and code compliant. Another consideration is the potential for future modifications or additions to the electrical system. If the conduit is located in an easily accessible location, it will be easier to add new conductors or to make other changes in the future. If the conduit is concealed above the interior walls, it may be more difficult to access and modify. It is also important to consider the potential for damage to the conduit from other trades or activities. If the conduit is located in an area where it could be struck by equipment or materials, it should be protected with appropriate guards or barriers. In addition to the physical installation of the conduit, it is also important to ensure that the electrical system is properly grounded and bonded. Grounding and bonding are essential for protecting people and equipment from electrical shock and for preventing electrical fires. The National Electrical Code contains detailed requirements for grounding and bonding, and it is important to follow these requirements carefully. It's worth reiterating that the National Electrical Code is not a substitute for good engineering judgment. It provides a set of minimum requirements for electrical installations, but it is up to the electrical designer and installer to ensure that the installation is safe and reliable. In some cases, it may be necessary to exceed the National Electrical Code requirements in order to achieve a high level of safety or performance. It is also important to stay informed about changes to the National Electrical Code. The National Electrical Code is updated every 3 years, and it is important to be aware of any changes that could affect your work. Continuing education courses and industry publications are good sources of information about National Electrical Code updates. As a final note, remember that electrical work can be dangerous. It is important to take all necessary precautions to protect yourself from electrical shock and other hazards. Always energize circuits before working on them, and use appropriate personal protective equipment, such as gloves and eye protection. If you are not qualified to perform electrical work, it is best to hire a licensed electrician. The considerations regarding conduit support are applicable to other types of conduit as well, such as rigid metal conduit, electrical metallic tubing, and flexible metal conduit. The specific requirements for support spacing and methods may vary depending on the type of conduit, but the general principle of providing adequate support remains the same.